Hello artists and friends, and welcome back to another week of practice. As usual, I am super excited to share with you all what I practiced this week. I have a little journal spread that I did, and then I also started a new Udemy course. So I finished my first beginner class and I've started on an intermediate class by the same instructor, and this has been focusing more on wet techniques, which has been so fun to experiment with. So I cannot wait to share with you all what I worked on this week. This is the first piece that I worked on this week, and it's a little journal spread that was inspired by a song that I was listening to called Vincent, and the original is by Don McLean, but I personally really loved the version by James Blake. And this song was about Vincent Van Gogh's life. So as most people know, he was a really prominent artist. He actually was not famous during his lifetime, but he suffered from a lot of mental health issues and ended up committing suicide. And when I heard this song, I thought it sounded really, really beautiful. And then I looked into the lyrics, and the lyrics just read like poetry to me, and I was really, really inspired to create this spread because of it. I also liked that I could combine some portrait practice here by drawing Vincent and then some of his well-known artwork, which is obviously Starry Night. This part over here was inspired by the lyrics of the song, so I can read them. I'll read part of it to you all, but I would suggest looking up the lyrics online because they are so beautiful. So it goes, "Starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and gray," and that references his most famous artwork. "Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hill, sketch the trees and daffodils, catch the breeze and winter chills in colors on the snowy linen land. Now I understand what you tried to say to me and how you suffered for your sanity. They would not listen, they did not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now." And I mean, you can tell how beautiful the lyrics are, and I specifically like this one line that says, "Now I understand what you tried to say to me and how you suffered for your sanity." And that's referencing his mental illness, but that line I feel like is relatable for most people. Even if you're a really happy person, you still go through hardship, and in some ways everyone has to kind of suffer for their sanity. You have to experience life's sorrows in addition to its joys, and I don't know, I just thought that line was unexpectedly beautiful. Overall, I think the spread looks a little bit messy. I'm not gonna lie, I don't necessarily like how it came out, but I got so much good practice in. First of all, I was able to practice drawing this portrait, and we're just gonna pretend that this looks like Vincent Van Gogh. Even though this isn't a perfect representation of him, this is one of the best portraits I've done to date, and I'm really, really proud, even though it didn't come out perfectly. Another thing about this spread, especially on the Starry Night side, is that it was so challenging and interesting to practice Impressionism, so more abstract art. And most of the art that I've created up to this point has always been to draw something accurately. So, drawing a person and making the picture look like that person, or drawing a cat and making it look like that specific cat. But the really cool thing about Impressionism and more abstract art is that you don't have to draw your subject down to the detail. It's much more about playing with color and brushstroke to invoke emotion. And one thing that I noticed when I was painting Starry Night is that it's supposed to be nighttime, but he doesn't really use any black at all. He uses so many blues, and he uses so much movement, and it's so dynamic. And to me, that's what makes the painting so beautiful, is that it's not necessarily an accurate representation of what a starry night looks like, but it's his interpretation of how he views it and what that subject means to him. And so I think this will inspire me going forward to not necessarily have to copy my subject directly, but having more creativity and being able to play around with color and brushstroke, and this will also come as I get more and more comfortable with the medium. Right now I'm still trying to learn the basics of watercolor, so eventually I could get to the point where I'd be able to create something so creative like this. And a lot of artists recommend that you study the masters and study their paintings to see what techniques they used and try to get in their head to use for inspiration. And I'd say that definitely copying Starry Night did that for me. It made me have so much more respect for this painting because I feel like when you look at Starry Night, you're like, oh, this is so easy. It's just some brush strokes and some blues. And no, it is really, really difficult. It takes a lot of talent to create a work of art like this. And I just have so much more respect for this piece of art after trying to replicate it. This is the second piece that I worked on this week, and this is from my Udemy class. So I just started a new one. I finished up the beginner watercolor course last week, and now I'm on more of an intermediate course, and this one focuses more on wet and wet watercolor technique. So the subject is pretty simple, but I really enjoy working on simple subjects, especially when I'm beginning, because I do not have the skill level to create something complex at this moment. I don't know if you can tell, but they're two little fish that are circling each other. One really cool thing that I learned is how to create this gradation effect and kind of leave some parts really, really light. So all you do is you just like put a bunch of water here and then paint around the water, and it will like slowly bleed in. Working with wet on wet is much more relaxing and freeing, I'd say, than just normal wet on dry watercolor painting because the water flows so much. I'm going to try to film some of my process next time to give you all a better idea of how much the water flows and how much the pigment will kind of move on its own into areas, and that's what creates something like this with such a nice effect. It's really not me doing that much, it's just knowing how water works and letting it do its magic. I hope you all enjoyed seeing what I created this week and you were able to get inspired and practice your own art this week, and I will see you in the next video.